Okay, the clock says 5:30, so we'll get started here. My name is John Bernstrom. I'm a public information officer for the City of Grand Forks. Welcome to City Hall. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are streaming and recording this meeting for future use. And so if you have a question or anything during public comment, we have a public comment card. Please come to a microphone so we can hear you. It is really night and day if you're not at a microphone. We can't hear a thing at all. So please, and for presenters as well, please be sure to speak into a microphone. Bathrooms around the corner, and we'll get started. I was asked to give a quick, just a 30,000 foot view look at what Grand Forks has for a flood action plan. And for those of you that caught the council meeting last night, you're going to see a lot of similar information. This is our flood protection system. This is the entire city of Grand Forks. So for the city proper, this is our permanent flood protection system. Here's flood walls and levees. This is the English Coulee diversion. This flood protection system, series of pump stations and gates and valves, and there are 7 road closures. That is probably from a public standpoint what you see the most when we have to close bridges or close roads. Based on what we're seeing from the National Weather Service early projections. Now, this is early, it's January. I don't envy that guessing what's going to happen in 2 months weather-wise. But we'll be have lots of things that'll be activated within our flood protection system within the city. Kind of a cool note, so last year we had I believe it was 8th highest flood on record. And once our flood protection system for the city of Grand Forks had everything in place, all the walls were in, all the pumps were going, it was maintained by 3 people. 3 people were able to do it and take care of it, and that worked out well. It worked out really well. This flood protection has been in place in both the 2009 flood and the 2011 flood, which were both top 5, and last year, which was top 8. Here's just a quick look at some of the features of it. We're all familiar with the flood walls, and this is the flood wall along North 3rd Street. What happens when that gets activated? Now, I don't mean to step on Weather Service's toes here at all. This is from their briefing last Friday. This graph, I will defer to the National Weather Service as far as everything it says in here. All we have added is the design of our flood protection system is designed to 57 feet for the city of Grand Forks, and the very top of the levees is 60 feet. Now, that's important to understand, is we don't want water right at the very top. If you ever held a glass of water that has water right to the top, you're spilling, right? You need a little bit of room. So there's for design standards, it's to 57 feet, and that takes into account that 3 feet. We use the term freeboard, waves, ice jams, sticks and stuff, blocking the water, causing it to back up. So that's built in. So 57 feet. These early projections here does have it on the radar a little bit. It's in the low percentages, but just for perception of what our flood protection system is capable up to. What are we doing now here within the city of Grand Forks? Stacy right here, we're doing the flood insurance seminars. A local insurance agent is just giving seminars on what flood insurance covers, what it doesn't cover. Oh, they changed the ballroom on the 4th. What is it? Where is it at now on the 4th? It's at the Alair Center still. In ballroom 3. Sorry about that. This is not in this room. It's going to be in ballroom 3 at the Alair Center on the 4th. But what flood insurance covers, what it doesn't cover, questions maybe you have to ask to your local agent when it comes to for homeowners and stuff. So working with our emergency management office and getting this put together. Understand your meeting last week had very good attendance, and we'll do it again at noon on Thursday and 5:30 on the 4th. Again, this is going to be ballroom 3 at the Alair Center. Ballroom 3. And then from a communication standpoint, this is what they get when they have a PIO give this presentation. I'm going to talk about the things we do. So we did this last year, and we're going to do it again. For the city of Grand Forks and county of Grand Forks, we have this website, grandforksgov.com/flood. We already have it up. This page is going to morph. It's going to change based on what information is available, what information comes out. Obviously, right now the river's frozen, so the river gauge isn't moving or anything like that. Last year we had this page up, and it was our most viewed page on our website for the entire year, and it had viewers. Majority of that 46,000 came in March and April of last year. So we are going to do the very same thing. The site is mobile friendly. We had a lot of traffic on it. We had county road closures on there. We also had sandbag information for out in the county of where to get it, what to do. The unfortunate part is this site started getting trafficked again in October when we got 5 inches, or in September when we got 5 inches of rain in a few hours. So it has become a resource for those in the area. With that, I will defer to others in the room. I understand there's other presentations. I don't mean to be rude. I need to run in the back and make sure our stream is working well. Any city questions you may have, we have other city representatives here. They'll be glad to answer them. So I will pass this on.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Dee Ann Haynes. I'm the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator for the state, based in Bismarck at the State Water Commission. Big thank you to the city, Grand Forks, for allowing us to come in and hold these meetings and just to communicate, the potential for spring flooding and resources available to help prepare and protect your property. With us today, we have representatives from FEMA, the National Weather Service, the Corps of Engineers, and Department of Emergency Services to provide resources again and answer questions you have. So to begin, we are going to show a quick video from our governor, and then we'll jump into the presentations.
Hi, I'm Governor Doug Burgum. Last fall, North Dakota faced record precipitation and unprecedented flooding across our state. Today, our soils are saturated, rivers are running high, and we've already seen the flooding impacts this winter from ice jams. These factors raise the risk of spring flooding. Where it can rain, it can flood, and we encourage you to know your flood risk and consider purchasing a flood insurance policy to financially protect yourself and your home. For more information, visit floodsmart.gov and talk to your insurance agent today. Typically, a policy through the National Flood Insurance Program takes 30 days to become effective, so taking action now matters. With flood insurance, property owners can recover more quickly and completely. The State Water Commission also makes it easy to understand your flood risk through their new North Dakota Risk Assessment Map Service, or NDRAM. This tool gives users a visual display of their flood risk and how their property would be affected during a major flood. Check out this online tool on the State Water Commission's website at swc.nd.gov. Team North Dakota is working to provide you with the resources and information you need to prepare for floods and other natural disasters. Visit ndresponse.gov to learn more.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Amanda Lee. I am the service hydrologist at the National Weather Service office here in Grand Forks. I apologize if everyone was looking for Mr. Gust, so I'm obviously not him, but hopefully I can handle it for you guys. So I'm going to go through a quick kind of review of what we went through last fall and so far this winter, and then kind of move into our potential spring flood threat for 2020. So the bottom line up front, we did issue an outlook last week, as was already mentioned late last week, that kind of gives a quick glance at the first numbers for this spring. As mentioned, it is very early. It is only the end of January, so there's a lot of winter yet to come, and spring. We got to get through the spring too, the spring weather. But the numbers that we did release are near or even slightly above what we were looking at that we did occur last spring. So spring 2019 numbers across the basin look highly likely at this point. And we still have winter to go to see how that could change. Last year was a top 10 flood up and down the Red River. So this year, looking at current conditions that we've received, rainfall through the fall and snowfall up through this point in the winter, does have the potential for maybe a top 5 flood up and down the Red. So like I said, still a lot to look forward to here of what kind of conditions we can experience. We did have record fall precipitation and then through the beginning of the winter. We've been quiet the last few weeks, thankfully, so that's helpful. But we did get hit hard through the fall, as everybody knows, and the beginning part of the winter. We are tracking a little high for the remaining winter so far, but we have been a little quiet now, so hopefully that'll help keep things a little lower, and I'll get it more into the outlooks for later the rest of the winter and into the spring. The little bit of good news that there is that we did have the early snow that helped insulate the ground a little bit. So we don't have our frost steps. Things aren't frozen quite as far down into the soil as we saw last spring. So last spring we got really cold really quickly and didn't have any snow to help insulate. So those frost steps really sunk down really early. So this year so far we don't really quite have that. So that is a good thing. The shallower that our frost depth is, the more room there is for water to get into the soil as we go throughout the runoff season. Obviously, the super wet soils and super saturated as we are, maybe that'll counteract that. So that's something that will have to be seen still. And as I mentioned, the not good news is that we've already reached these levels, precipitation, snowfall-wise, and it's only the end of January. So we do still have the entire month of February, winter precipitation through March, and worse, even rainfall. So we'll have to see what kind of rainfall we can get to. Some of you might have seen this graphic we issued late last week, that gives you the different colors indicate minor, moderate, or major flooding. So yellow, red, or purple shows that our outlook last week has a 50% chance of hitting those levels. So we do issue numbers that kind of run the entire probability spectrum, but this graphic only focuses on that 50-50 chance of a certain location hitting those levels. So you can see there's a lot of purple, a lot of red also indicating good chances for major to moderate, or moderate to major up and down the valley and throughout the tributaries. Just for fun, here's a graphic just kind of indicating the current active diversions that are in place across the region. You can see some of those locations, the flood threat is decreased, obviously due to their diversions or their protection. So that's something to keep in mind. Many of those have been there for quite a while already. Notice the newest one up in Grafton will be operational this spring. So that should help protect the city of Grafton themselves from flood risk. And I'll talk more about that later as I get more into some numbers. So what did we go through last year in 2019? This graphic shows the precipitation percentiles, or how wet were we across the entire country throughout the entire year last year. So January to December 2019. The more green you are, the more wet you were. So obviously, South Dakota got hit hard, especially the eastern part of the state, and had some record wet values. And good portions of southeastern and eastern North Dakota, including over into the Red River Valley, also had these record values. So that was precipitation-wise as a whole through the whole year of 2019. Another way to look at it, here's via entire states. So this graphic shows out of 125 years of records for precipitation across each state, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan all had their record amount of precipitation last year. So that's a large area to receive that kind of precipitation. So, and for us, a lot of that did come in the second half of the year. So that is a part of our buildup into our spring flood. So drilling down closer to home here, you could see kind of across eastern North Dakota and into the Red River Valley and northwestern Minnesota, some dark greens and a little bit of blue indicating throughout that September 1st period up until yesterday, we are running 4 to 8 inches above normal. So whatever that normal value is for that time period, September till now, that whole region has seen 4 to 8 inches above normal. And getting really into the numbers, looking specifically at Fargo and Grand Forks. So for Fargo, for that time period, September through yesterday, they've had a total of 11.53 inches of liquid precipitation. So that's taking into account rainfall plus the amount of liquid within snow that we've received. So they're coming in number 2 in their entire historical database. As for Grand Forks, we've already knocked that whole thing out of the park by nearly 3 inches. So we reached our record for that time frame here in Grand Forks at 14.81 inches. So this graphic will take a little bit of time to explain. So let's focus on the graphic first here on the right. It's showing throughout 2018 and 2019 the stream flow at the river gauge here in Grand Forks. So that bold black line that starts out on the left, that's kind of in the middle of the graphic in the green, shows the up and the down throughout the river throughout 2018 and 2019. You can see for most of 2018, it falls within that green shaded area, which is pretty much around normal stream flow conditions. As we get into spring 2019, so kind of looking at March, you can see this big jump here. So this was our spring flood this year. It jumped up. The black line is up into this dark blue, which is well above normal. So kind of in that 95th percentile range of occurring. So we stayed kind of high throughout the whole summer. And then boom, we had all that rainfall in the fall that jacked us up. Not quite as high as it was in the spring, but pretty darn high, especially for the time of year, considering it was the fall period. And you can see that that black line is actually above the dark blue shaded area, indicating that those are record conditions. So as we got into freeze up here into December and later in the winter, the river actually did freeze up above that blue area, showing that it was the highest it's ever been for that time of year. So going back to the fall flooding, we did reach a fall crest record. So we peaked at 40.95, and those are preliminary numbers, so it could change by just a little bit more still. But that's the highest the river has ever been for that time of year here in Grand Forks. So that was a whole 10 feet higher than the previous record of 30.76 back from 2010. So that's quite a big change, going from, your record is so high and then the next one is only 10 feet below that. So it's kind of a big thing. And just of note, the Red River did set crest from last fall, crest records from north of Fargo all the way up. So Halstead, Grand Forks, Oslo, Pembina, they all hit their fall records this last fall. So, and here's the same kind of graphic for Fargo. Not quite as dire, but it's still pretty high up there, showing that they did get just close to their record for the fall. I think they came in second at 23.4, and their record was at 25.5. So, and they also froze up, just the very top end of that range. So they are pushing the highest that they had seen at freeze up time, also down in the Fargo area. So talking more about freeze up and what the stream flow conditions look like, you can see across the country, this would have been for towards the end of December, lots of blues and blacks, which is high to very high for stream flow. You'll notice there's some data not missing, and that's just because we have a lot of frozen river readings up here right now. So you can kind of extrapolate in your head and see what it looks like, and obviously across the area it's high to record high. So just for fun, the slide after this is going to show a little graphic with a lot of data, but it's kind of breaking down the Red River itself into 3 different components. So it's going to start from the beginning of the river up through Fargo and look at that segment. Then it's going to look at the Fargo to Grand Forks segment, and then the East Grand Forks to the Emerson, Manitoba segment. And it starts from 1902 and goes all the way till this last year, 2019. The different colors, the red indicates the water coming into Fargo. The green indicates from Fargo to Grand Forks, and the purple or the blue is from Grand Forks to Emerson. And I highlighted this area because it shows you kind of our wet cycle that we've been in since the early to mid 90s, and how how these bars are all quite a bit higher than they were back here. And you can see that the contribution from each of these areas of the river have gotten larger and larger. So it's an interesting trend to look at. And you can see how 2019 was pretty high up there. And you can also see 2009, 2011, pretty high up there. Obviously 97. So it's an interesting graphic to look at about how the last 25 years or so, there's just been more water flowing through the system in all these locations. This slide is pretty much a duh. Everybody knows, when do we have our highest flooding? Well, in the spring. Charged with melting snowpack, the landscape is still frozen, making it hard for any water to infiltrate into it. And we don't usually get the heavier rains of the summer yet in the spring, thankfully. So here's two graphics of the gauge at Grand Forks. Here's 2018 and here's 2019. And you can see the big peaks in the spring and here. But then you can also see some minor peaks in the summer as we do get those convective rains. And then again, possibly in the fall. And you can see how this fall, this came pretty close to what we had in the spring, but not quite across the area. Once again, here's a lot of lines and a lot of numbers. This is just showing the precipitation throughout the Red River Basin itself from 1896 all the way up to now, with a question mark for now. Just kind of look at the green line. You can see how the precipitation varies from year to year, obviously. You can see these later years kind of are higher. We have a lot more higher years than we had back here. And here's where we're sitting right now. And this is for September through April. So this includes actual precipitation data from September up until now, and then from now until the end of March at climatological values. So we obviously don't know what's going to happen precipitation-wise between now and the end of March, so we just use the climatology values. So this could potentially be a conservative estimate of what kind of total precipitation we have. It depends on what's going to happen between now and the end of March, of where this number will actually end up. So taking the same data on that previous graph, and putting on top of it streamflow values, you could see that these later years with the higher precipitation had some higher streamflow values. So here's 2019, where it had the higher fall and winter precipitation, had higher streamflow values, and our precipitation is already up here. So is our streamflow values going to be up there too? So we'll have to see how that pans out. So I really like this graphic because it does a good job of explaining how do we get major floods up here in the Red River Valley. It's not just a component of what happened in the fall, what happens in the winter. There's a lot more to it. So we like to talk about how there's 7 different components. So as of now, we have these 2 crossed off the list. The fall moisture and the base streamflow that we're sitting at right now are pretty much at or above record at this point. So we can definitely cross those 2 off the list. Just a side note, the 2009, 10, and 11 spring flood years also had these historic, for the time, wet falls before that. So you can kind of draw some kind of conclusions there on how that could play out. So moving into the next 3 conditions here, frost depth, as I already talked about, is a little shallower than we had last spring. So that is one piece of good news there that we'll continue to monitor. The Southern Valley is kind of more in that 10 to 14 inch range. So they're only frozen down about a foot. Meanwhile, you move up further north in the valley, you can get closer to 30 inches or so. So, which is more normal for the valley. So that's good. Winter snowpack is above normal, except up in the very far north along the international border region and kind of out in the Devil's Lake Basin. They're running a little lower than the rest of the area. And snow water equivalent. This is the first time I mentioned that term, but that's actually probably more important than the actual snowfall itself. How much water was in that snowfall that did fall and is currently sitting on the ground. So we go out often at our office and other places across the basin and get measurements of how much water is in the snow that is on the ground. So we just took a measurement yesterday at our office, and we had 14 inches. So there's a total of 14 inches of snowpack, and it had 3.7, I think, inches of water in that snowpack. So And those kind of values are kind of what we see when the spring flood begins. So we've kind of already gotten to that point, and we still have February and March to go. So that's not good news there. So we are getting pretty close to checking 4 and 5 off the list. And as I said, number 3 is good news, but did the really wet fall and the soil's freezing up that way? Is it going to counteract that? So we have yet to see. So here, just a quick few images I showed, kind of 10-inch frost depth down here, up to 20s in the Central Valley, and a little more up here where they don't have quite as much snowpack and they've been able to freeze a little further deeper. Snow depth-wise, kind of that middle of the valley pack, 10 to 20 inches, a little less way down here, and like I said, less up near the border and out in the Devil's Lake Basin. But more importantly, as I mentioned, how much water is in that snow. So we're already looking at these normal values, and I pulled this image this morning, so showing that we're already kind of in that 3, 4, even seeing some 5-inch reports pop up for liquid water in the current snowpack, which is what we usually see when we get to spring flood time. So these last 2 ingredients, spring thaw and heavy rain, we don't know. So how is the spring thaw going to play out? Last year, we all know here in the valley, could have been a lot worse if we would have had a rapid melt. We would have had a lot of rainfall on top of a rapid melt, but we had a good 4 or 5 week period where we hardly had any precipitation. We had awesome temperatures where it was melting just a little bit during the day, freezing at night, following that cycle for a while. So things definitely could have been a lot worse last spring, but we had Mother Nature on our side there. So we don't know yet if that's going to happen again. We'll have to wait and see. And spring rains. Nobody wants more snow when we get to late winter, but for flooding, we don't really want heavy rains either. So it's kind of a give or take what kind of temperatures you want when that precipitation is going to fall. So what does that outlook look like here moving into February? So this upcoming week, kind of more of the same that we've had in the last week or two. Not a whole lot for precipitation-wise. This map shows maybe a 1/10 or so of accumulated precipitation in the next week. So not a whole lot to worry about here. No big storm systems on the horizon. Temperatures are going to get above normal a little bit. Maybe we'll get above freezing for a brief period of time. So we'll see about that. I just hope all that doesn't lead to all that pesky freezing drizzle and fog that we've been dealing with lately, but can't have it perfect, I guess. Moving into the week after that, so this would be roughly February 4th to February 10th-ish. We're looking to go back towards below normal temperatures and back to a more active pattern with above average precipitation. So our break might not last forever. And then these graphics are showing for the month of February as a whole. So continued below normal temperatures, maybe active, maybe not, kind of equal chances for above normal precipitation or below normal precipitation. So no strong signal either way with that. February, March, and April as a whole, so that 3-month period, kind of getting us into the spring melt period. Below normal temperatures, above normal precipitation. The longer we stay below normal temperatures and we stay cooler, the later our thaw is going to be, which would probably bring better chances for rain instead of snow. So we don't necessarily want that either. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But that's what we're thinking at this time is maybe the potential for a delayed melt. We'll have to see how that plays out. So once again, here are those graphics and the colored dots showing you the 50-50 chance of reaching minor, moderate, or major flood stage up and down the valley. Lots of purple, especially along the main stem, red, and a lot of purple and a lot of red on the tributaries. So we saw this graphic earlier. It's not the easiest graphic to understand. They're not my favorite. But the black lines here indicate the current conditions, the current expectations for flood that we have. Meanwhile, the blue line is the historical, and that's based off of the last 64 years, I believe. So covering that historical period. So whenever this black line is above this blue line, shows that you have a better chance of flooding. So we all know that already. If you look at the numbers at the bottom, So here's 50%. We go up to our black line. So we have a 50% chance of 48-ish feet, give or take. So that's why that color-coded dot on the previous slide was purple, because 50% chance reached that. And as it was also mentioned earlier, you know, that 1% to 2% chance brings us to that 60 plus. So, and last spring, we still had values like this last spring too on this high end of the spectrum. So, a lot of communities will look at different levels and decide what kind of preparedness actions they're going to take based on these numbers. So, it's nice having an entire spectrum of the possibilities, but it can kind of make your head spin on what's going to actually happen. So, this is another graphic that displays the same data, but I personally find a lot easier to understand. So this is also for Grand Forks, showing the minor flood stage here in orange, moderate red, major in purple, and then giving those percentiles on a graphic here. So there's a 95% chance of reaching moderate flood stage. Meanwhile, there's a good 75% chance of going above major flood stage. So, and this graphic is nice because, for one, it's easier to understand, in my opinion, but it also gives you your perspective for, here's your record level right here from 97, and then it also shows you a few other notable crests, is what we're calling them. So here's last year, 2019 at 46.9. This is an experimental product. We're the only office in the Weather Service doing this right now. Maybe, hopefully next year it'll be expanded across all of the Midwest and the Northern Plains. So, like I said, it's the same graphic as in, same data as in the other graphic, just kind of a lot easier to understand. So you could go to our website here, and you could see these graphics for up and down the valley. So same kind of graphic here for Crookston. I'm just going to hit a few points that are around the Grand Forks area. Same thing here, moderate to major flooding, high possibility. Black line is above the blue line. And here's the other graphic showing the same kind of numbers. So still 50-50 chance of hitting that major flood stage in Crookston. Oslo, as we all know, they get a lot of breakouts once they reach a certain level and water just starts spreading out everywhere. So a lot of times they're pretty much guaranteed to hit that major flood level, which this graph indicates. So once again, that would cut off access into town, into the town of Oslo. So this graphic was a little harder to make because we couldn't fit all those numbers in there since they were so certain that, you know, they were going to be above major flood stage. Grafton, I mentioned earlier, they've got their new bypass system in place. So these values are for the river gauge that's actually right in the middle of town. So the in-town gauge will not see these values, hopefully, because of the protection that's in place. So that's why we have this kind of little disclaimer on the side here. But this information can still be useful for the people that are outside of the protection and are used to seeing these numbers in the river gauge heights, and they can kind of plan for that. So the same kind of story here. I think this might be the last one I have included. Pembina, same thing up there. Pretty good chances of hitting major flood stage no matter what happens from here on out for the rest of the winter and spring. So, and all their numbers here are above the major flood stage. So you can go to our website, which down here, weather.gov/FGF, or you can just replace FGF with Grand Forks and it'll bring you to our website. And it'll show you, you can find all of these graphics for all of the river forecast points across our area. So that'll cover the entire Red River Basin and even over into the Devil's Lake Basin if anyone's interested. So same slide as before. Our outlook late last week, did indicate numbers that already at this point could reach or exceed what did occur in spring 2019. That was the top 10, like we already said. Spring 2020 could be a top 5 if we continue on this track. The record fall and winter precipitation up and down the valley is contributing to that. And then late winter to early spring up until this point, we are tracking a little high right now, so we'll see how the rest of the winter and the spring play out. So a really quick summary: widespread runoff, moderate to major flooding up and down the valley, Probably plenty of road closures, plenty of flood walls put in place across the region. Maybe see some impacts to interstates if we get high enough. Worse than 2019, question mark. Possible top 5 flood. So we've got a lot more winter and spring to go. And here are the dates for our next outlooks. So the next one will be on Thursday, February 13th, and then every 2 weeks after that until we probably start melting. So once we start melting and we have water moving, we can't do these numbers anymore because it's just the computer model can't handle that. So we get into the actual nitty gritty of issuing actual forecasts saying you will rise to this point by this day and such and such. So, but we try to provide these outlook numbers every few weeks up until that point and refine them as we go through. We receive more precipitation. We get a better handle on future precipitation and things like that. So if you ever have any questions, our office is 24/7. You can contact us via email or this phone number. You can always give a call and somebody will answer the phone. Here's my contact information, and then Greg Gust, the other gentleman who would do these presentations too. So I think that is all I have.
Good evening. My name's Matthew Buddy, and I'm with FEMA. I'm a specialist with the National Flood Insurance Program out of the office in Denver. I also have my colleague here with me this evening, Diana Herrera. So we're going to talk a little bit about flood insurance. But first, I just want to thank the City of Grand Forks and also the State Water Commission for inviting us to be out here this evening. I learned something amazing today. I learned the proper way to eat a potato chip is covered in chocolate. And I want to thank everyone who has experienced that and played a part in that. I hope that I can share some knowledge with you about flood insurance that has the same impact that this new revelation about potato chips has had on me. So there's a little bit of uncertainty in the forecast. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I can tell you we do not need a flood like 1997 or 2009 or 2011. We don't need an event like that for it to be a disaster for you if you have flood damage. The number one thing that you can do to protect the life that you've built or your business or if you're a renter, whether you're a homeowner, a business owner, or renter, the number one thing you can do is purchase flood insurance. So it doesn't take a lot of water to cause a lot of damage. If you think about this room, if we had just a few inches of water in here, the flooring, all of the furniture, cabinets, drywall and electrical, things like that, water will start wicking up. It spreads out and causes a lot of damage. So think about what's in your house and what's low and would get wet with just a few inches of water and how quickly that starts to add up. One of the most common misconceptions about flood insurance is people think, well, you know what, Matt, all of this sounds great, but I have homeowners, I'm good, I'm covered. Unfortunately, most homeowners policies do not cover flood damage. There are some out there. In fact, we just heard from an agent last night that sells a homeowners policy that bundles flood coverage. But for the majority of homeowners policies, it's excluded. So I guess number one, check your policy to see if you have flood coverage. I would suspect you probably don't. So you would want to talk to your insurance agent about additional flood coverage. The second fact that I want to talk about is this is a national statistic. 20% of the claims that we pay from the National Flood Insurance Program come from policies that are not located in a high-risk flood zone. In North Dakota, we ran the numbers, and it's actually more like 40% of the claims statewide are on policies that are not in what people traditionally consider to be the flood zone, the flood plain. Mother Nature does not read a flood map. if there is a big flooding event and we have a presidential disaster declaration and FEMA can come in with resources and assistance, that may happen. But with flood insurance, you don't need a presidential disaster declaration. So again, if it's your house, it's a disaster for you. And if we don't have a large scale event, but maybe it's isolated to a small neighborhood, you can file a flood claim and have coverage. In looking at Amanda's presentation showing the spike last year in the fall, what else happens in the fall? We lose leaves on trees. And if we have a bunch of leaves that block the storm drain and we have a big rain event and the water can't get through the storm drain and impacts your house, that's a disaster to you. So it's important to make sure that you look at things like flood insurance and understand what it covers and what it doesn't. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. A couple other facts here. If you do get disaster assistance, it could be a loan that you have to pay back or a very limited grant through FEMA. It's not going to make you whole. It's designed to provide kind of that immediate needs, temporary housing, things like that. We've looked at the last 5 years, and the average claim is about $70,000. So the big question that we always get is, well, how much does this flood insurance cost? And that's not always an easy question to answer because it really depends on what your risk is. So we look at things like what flood zone are you in? What is the age of your structure? How much coverage do you want? Do you want a $1,000 deductible or a $10,000 deductible? There's a lot of different variables that will change what the premium is. It starts out about $300 a year. If you are not located in a high-risk flood zone, again, that area that we typically refer to as the floodplain. So coverage amounts for a residential structure, the maximum amount of coverage you can purchase is $250,000 of building coverage and $100,000 on contents coverage. And for a non-residential policy, you can buy $500,000 of building coverage and $500,000 of contents coverage. So they are separate. In some situations, they can be bundled together. In other situations, you have to purchase building and contents separately. We try to make it easy, so you can purchase it with a credit card. The governor had a great message, just to reiterate. The best time to buy flood insurance was 30 days ago. The next best time is today because we do have that 30-day wait. So, we're looking at, as Amanda said, we have some more forecasts that are coming out. I would encourage you, don't try to, wait and see what the forecast is going to be. Don't buy this because you want to file a claim. Buy it for protection. Buy it because you want to sleep easy at night, knowing that you have protection. Insurance is not a lottery ticket that you're hoping to cash in. It's something that you buy for protection. So don't wait. We don't want to get into a situation where you decide to purchase a policy and you pay the premium and we have a flood 28 days from the day you turn your premium payment in and you don't have coverage because that 30-day wait is in place in most situations. Contact your agent. That's the number one thing that you can do to get more information in terms of pricing and coverage amounts. You can also go to floodsmart.gov, which is the website for the National Flood Insurance Program. We have a bunch of different handouts over on the table that have a lot of this information in the presentation, including the websites. But there's just a wealth of information at the website, more on pricing, what's covered, what's not, other things that you can do to protect your property. If you don't want to go to the website and you actually want to talk to someone, you can call the hotline there at the 1-800 number. And then I'm also just want to plug ready.gov. That's the website for FEMA's National Preparedness Program. There's a lot of great resources there, such as checklists for what should be in your disaster supply kit. things that you can print off, take to the store, and have with you to make sure you have things like flashlights and batteries and medications and things like that. So in terms of coverage, I mentioned you can buy coverage for residential or non-residential buildings, or contents coverage, or in some situations they are bundled together. If you have multiple structures on your property, unlike most homeowners policies, you would have to look at that and purchase separate policies for separate structures. One thing that comes up a lot, especially here in the Midwest, is because we have a lot of basements, is limited basement coverage. Flood insurance does not cover all things in the basement. Unfortunately, that's what fills up first, and in order to keep the premiums from skyrocketing and being very expensive, we had to limit basement coverage. So things that are covered in the basement are all of the mechanical and the utilities that are needed to run the upstairs of the house. So things like furnace, hot water heater, fuel tanks, things like that. If you have contents coverage, it will pay for the washer, the dryer, the freezer, and the food in the freezer. But we're not going to pay for things like a finished basement. An 80-inch screen TV, unfortunately, is not going to be reimbursed through flood insurance if it's in the basement. One other thing that is covered, and this is a really big one, I think, is the foundation. If the foundation is damaged as a result of a flood event, that's what the rest of the house sits on. I mean, that's huge. So just understand that there is limited basement coverage. Again, this is all described in the policy, what's covered and what's not covered, and your agent should be able to go through all this information with you and make sure that you're clear on what's covered and what's not. One of the other nice features in the policy is we will cover mold if you go in and actively try to mitigate it. So certainly if there is some type of evacuation order or you're out of your house and it's not safe to return, we don't want you to go back in until those evacuation orders have been lifted. But as soon as it's safe to do so, if you can go back in and try to get that mold to stop, we have a lot of publications, using things like bleach and cleaning that up. That is something that's covered. And then finally, let's say that you're damaged from a flooding event and you have to file a claim. This last bullet point here is something that's built into all flood policies. It's called increased cost of compliance. So if you're damaged beyond a certain threshold and you go to the city or the county and you want to rebuild, and they say, hey, you're going to have to elevate your structure because we have new codes and new standards, so you're going to have to elevate your lowest floor. There's actually some additional money that's built into the flood insurance policy that will help pay to bring that structure into compliance. So that's kind of a nice thing that's included in all flood insurance to help not only bring you into compliance, but the idea is to make you more resilient and to make you safer for future flooding events. Another thing that's built into the policy is loss avoidance measures. So if the Weather Service issues a flood bulletin and there's an imminent threat of flooding, the city's issuing evacuation orders, and the water's coming, and you do something to help mitigate damage to that structure, the National Flood Insurance Program will pay up to $1,000 to do things like sandbags, fill water pumps, plastic sheeting, lumber, things like that. Even labor to fill sandbags at the federal minimum wage. Keep all of the receipts because you can get reimbursed up to $1,000, and you don't have to have a loss in order to file this particular claim through your flood policy. It's something that if we can pay a little bit to help prevent a loss, we want to do that. So this is also something that you can get reimbursed if you move things to a storage unit or something like that. So this slide is kind of, I don't really like it because there's a lot of words, but I think this is an important one to discuss because this is what the National Flood Insurance Program considers a flood. This actually comes right out of the policy. This is the definition. The key things to remember are underlined here. It's a general and temporal condition of 2 or more acres or 2 or more properties that are impacted by these 3 bullet points here, and I'll just kind of focus in on the second one. Surface water from any source. So flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program does not cover subsurface water. So if you have water, you have a high water table, high groundwater, and you have water coming into the basement, that's not something that you could file a claim for. The best advice I can tell you there is make sure that you have a sump pump and that it's running and getting that water out. But if you have surface water from any source, whether it's the red coming out of its bank, whether it's that rapid snow melt, whether it's that rain event, water from any source, you can file a flood claim through the National Flood Insurance Program. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands kind of what a flood is and what's covered under a flood policy. So, what can you do now? Well, we've talked about buying, or if you have a policy, renew it. It doesn't have to be this spring. It can be another rain event in the summer or the fall. Again, buy this for protection. Buy it for peace of mind. Buy it so you know that should you get damaged, you're going to have coverage. Some other things that you can do is move things, whether it's things that are in your basement or on your first level. If they're important documents, move them up to a higher, put them in a closet, put them up high. Even sometimes if you get those big Rubbermaid totes and put things in there, that'll at least give you a little bit of protection. I personally have been flooded before in 2015 and had a lot of baby pictures of my kids in the basement. And here I am preaching to you guys every day, elevate. And I'm luckily it was in a Rubbermaid container and I was able to get that and get it up to a higher level before all of those pictures got damaged. But do this stuff now. Don't wait because when we get closer and closer to runoff and you're going to be thinking about other things, do this stuff now while we have time. Check your sump pump. If you have one, or go get one. Install a battery backup. They're pretty cheap. We were talking earlier before the meeting, and there's some other ones that actually function off of water pressure that don't even require a battery. So look at those options just to make sure that if should power go out, that your sump pump is still running. Clearing debris from gutters and downspouts. Again, we're just trying to get water away from the foundation of your structure and get water away. So make sure that those are clear. If you have any fuel tanks or propane tanks, these things become kind of floating missiles. We just had one recently out in Colorado that ended up across the field because the water came up. These things become very buoyant and moved it across the field. So make sure that you have those things strapped down or otherwise anchored so they don't float away. We're pretty fortunate here that we don't typically have real quick evacuations like flash flooding that we need to get out in a hurry. But certainly if you need to build an emergency supply kit, if you have, medications that you need, glasses, things like that you're going to be away from your house for any extended period of time, make sure that you have a kind of a go kit. Again, whether it's in a Rubbermaid container. I have young kids, so I keep mine in a backpack so I have my hands free if I need to leave. If you have pets or you have animals, make sure you understand what you're going to do with them in the event of an evacuation. And then one other thing that is just good practice is to take some pictures or videos of your possessions. This isn't even necessarily related to flood insurance, but if you had ever had to file a claim under your homeowner's policy, having that documentation of your possessions and what you own is going to be very helpful in trying to go through the claims process. So I would just encourage you, all of these or any of these, make a plan tonight. I would challenge every single one of you to pick one or two of these things and set a deadline to do them, whether it's this weekend, whether it maybe you're going to talk to your agent tomorrow. Go to the website, go to floodsmart.gov, go to ready.gov, sign up for alerts. If we can't warn you, if we don't know how to warn you, we can't tell you to evacuate, or we can't give you the notice. So make sure you understand what local resources are available to stay informed. Are we doing questions at the end? Are there any questions on flood insurance? Oh, one other thing, sign up for one of the insurance trainings that they have coming up in the next on Thursday, or just show up. Get more information, get informed, make a commitment to do something, and give yourself a deadline.
Yes, please.
So this question is in reference to coverage of basement. A basement that has walkout doors, that's on the lowest level of the house, is that no longer covered as a living area and covered as just a basement?
So what the policy defines a basement is any area that's subgrade on all sides. So again, if the grade of the basement falls away, we would not consider that to be a basement. If it goes up, we would consider it to be a basement. So it's a little bit dependent. I live in a tri-level, so I have kind of a garden style family area that's subgrade on all sides. Typically you wouldn't think of that being a basement, but under the definition of under the policy, anything that was damaged in that area would have limited coverage. So again, if it's an area that's subgrade, below grade on all sides, we would consider that to be a basement, and the limited coverage would apply.
Well, the lower level with the doors has a patio, but then back in, I think, 79, a dike was built up around the patio.
So and we can talk maybe specifically about your situation, but we'd look at the whole kind of side of the building and see what the grade does on that. Are there any other questions about flood insurance? Okay, well, I will turn it over to Dee Ann, and we will also be around to answer questions one-on-one at the end if you want to wait till the end.
All right, so again, my name is Dee Ann Haynes, and I work at the Water Commission as the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. And recently, over the last couple of years, we have been working on this study called Base Level Engineering through a partnership with FEMA, because we understand that preparing for and recovering from a flood is much easier when you know where the risk is ahead of time. But in the past, articulated flood risk has been identified through flood insurance rate maps, but they are not available everywhere across the state. So this effort, the Base Level Engineering, used LIDAR to create a large-scale modeling to depict that flood risk statewide. It is a large file, so through the State Water Commission, we designed a website called ND RAM, for North Dakota Risk Assessment Map Service to house all that data so that you could go on there and figure out what your risk is, especially in areas where a flood insurance rate map does not exist. So here's an example of what you will see if you log onto the website. Or I guess the website directly is shown there, but if you also go to the State Water Commission website, it is listed on our homepage. So swc.nd.gov will take you there. But once you log in, you'll first see a map of the entire state. So if you go to the property tab here at the top, you can type in a house number and a zip code and find a structure that route, or you can zoom in using the magnifying glass that you also see at the top and zoom into a particular area of interest. And once you do that, you can click on this information tab at the top, and it will populate these fields down here on the left to show what the different elevations of various flood events would be, including depth. So it's kind of hard to read on this screen here, but and also it's important to note that at the top there are these two options. So the flood insurance rate maps that FEMA has, if a digital version is available, you can view it here by just toggling over to that tab. Otherwise, click on the base level engineering, and that's that additional data. It's not a regulatory product, but it can be used to help educate where that risk may be and make plans, whether it's mitigation plans, informed decisions on insurance, emergency access, those type of things. Down here, you can also download the data. If you're working on a project engineering firms, that's typically what they're going to be looking for. And you can print a map, so you can take that along with you. I think that's all I have to show on this slide. But if you guys have questions about it, there are some brochures on the table over there, including a business card with the web address. So you guys can access this data later on and reference it. If you have questions, please contact State Water Commission. We're more than happy to walk you through that. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Jers with Department of Emergency Services to talk about some other resources we have available at the state.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Todd Jers. I'm the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. I work out of the Department of Emergency Services with North Dakota. I'm here kind of to promote a couple things. One is, you heard the governor talk about this ndresponse.gov. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all the resources that a person probably would need for flood preparedness or any other disasters that are going around or through the state. It actually has links to, I believe, the DOT road report, Amber Alerts. It's a great website that they've created. I think it has most of the resources that these people have been talking about tonight on there. You can see there it has the ND-RAM service on there, National Flood Insurance Program. It's a great one-stop shop. It has a lot of the how to build a sandbag, all that flood preparedness stuff that Matt was mentioning. I think if you go, it's kind of hard to read here, but it talks about evacuation tips, emergency kits, they recommend. Like I said, it's just really a great one-stop shop. So if you remember that ndresponse.gov, that's the website. Then the next thing I kind of quick wanted to talk about are the 3 grant programs that I manage with the state of North Dakota. We have a hazard mitigation program. This is connected to the disaster declarations that we frequently get in the state of North Dakota, unfortunately. And we do have an enhanced plan in the state, and that gets us an extra 5% of the disaster declaration dollars. Then the other two programs that we have are the PDM and the FMA, the pre-disaster mitigation and the flood mitigation. Both of these are available annually. The kicker here, those two are competitively picked, so we're competing against the every state. Right now, the PDM program, I believe, has about $250 million granted to it or allocated to it. So we just put in that grant cycle is ending here on January 30th, I believe, or 31st, and we just put applications in for about close to $11 million. We've been very successful. Last year, I think we got about $20 million worth of grants through that program. And the same with the flood mitigation assistance. That also is competitive. The kicker there, it has to have NFIP insurance to qualify for. I think throughout the years since '97, I believe we have participated in like 1,400 different flood buyouts throughout the state. So our department is a great resource if you want to do some mitigation activities. And here are some of the eligible hazard mitigation activities out there. We have done quite a few of these. There's a few that we haven't, but we're definitely willing to try. Wildlife mitigation, in the state, I don't think we've done any projects of that. But there is a few areas, believe it or not, that probably could do some. But yeah, it's quite an extensive list. And the bottom right has a miscellaneous or other. We're always willing to listen if you have some mitigation ideas that have some benefit costs or that we can prove that there's some benefit to it. We'll definitely pitch it to FEMA. They're always looking for new and creative ideas for different projects. So with that, I believe, and there's my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email.
All right, that does conclude our formal presentation. So I just, again, wanted to thank the City of Grand Forks for allowing us to come in here and present this information to you. If anybody has questions that you want to ask now, you're more than welcome to, or if you want to visit with us one-on-one at the end, we will be sticking around for a little bit. And